Welcome to the Pitcher Nail Down. I'm Jason Gilbo. With me is Justin Elick. Taking a look at pitching, another smallish Monday slate, just 7 games. At least we have some names. There's always some downside with some of these guys, but we've seen far worse pitching slates. I don't think it's that bad.
No, especially compared to two of the last 3 Mondays, it's been just absolutely horrible. So, there's actually some pitchers in decent spots tonight. There's probably 4 to 5 guys you actually feel pretty decent about. I don't know about you, but 4 to 5 guys I feel pretty good about playing tonight. And I do think there's going to be at least one guy that's going to be really popular, but even he's in a game with a pretty high total.
Yeah, definitely. And we'll look at kind of those top 2 options that most people would gravitate towards. We'll talk about Carlos Martinez first. Obviously, this guy's been very solid this year. Going into a bad ballpark, a little bit of a weather issue. Cincinnati's still around a 4.5 run total. I don't mind him. I definitely still think there's some risk going up against this team.
Yeah, it's still a team that's top 6 in ISO and WOBA against righties. A team that it was his first start of the season, so obviously let's not get too carried away on it. But they hit him pretty hard in that one, and they've had some success against him in the past. But I am kind of worried about, especially on DraftKings, 12-5 for a guy in a small ballpark with a 12.5 run total. A guy that, looking at his numbers, he's got a decent amount of strikeouts, obviously, as he usually does, but that walk rate's much higher than you'd like it to be. He does a good job keeping the ball in the ballpark, less than 1 homer per 9, but I don't know. I think it's on FanDuel, I definitely like him a lot more. On DraftKings, I see a whole lot of merit to fading him if you want some of these top bats, because there's not you think 12-5, I don't care what slate it is. There's 5 pitchers on the planet I consider paying that price for, and Carlos Martinez is not one of them. I think he's going to be really popular. I think in cash games, especially, you can just play him, and I think he'd be fine. But he's not my favorite option.
Yeah, 12-5 it's too expensive for me. And as you said, there's about 5 guys, and 2 of them are hurt. Bumgarner and Syndergaard. You got Kershaw and Chris Sale. Those are the only guys that I'll pay over $12K for.
Yeah, that's pretty much it for me too.
So, yeah, I definitely think FanDuel is much more in play. We'll go to the next guy, Jeff Samardzija. This guy, we're talking about a huge difference, about 3K. This guy's been solid. Had a little rough up against the Nationals, but as most pitchers do, that's a good offense. But before that, he's been absolutely stellar.
Yeah, you look at, you ignore things like the stupid surface statistics like ERA, where he's got, I think, a 4.6. And, his actual statistics just show how dumb that stat is, because he's got the best SIERA and XFIP on this slate. 284 XFIP, 299 SIERA, 118 WHIP is solid. That's not the best, but it's still really good. 3% walk rate, 28% strikeout rate. And the other thing is, he's allowing a 340 BABIP, which you got to imagine is going to regress some. Left on base percentage under 67% too. So he might even really be better than what we've seen so far. And obviously you prefer him pitching, and you prefer anybody pitching in San Francisco, but Miller Park, it's a spot where, this is still a team that doesn't have Ryan Braun. They got a 30% strikeout rate over the last 2 weeks. It's not much lower than that for the season. I think 25, somewhere in there. So, he's my favorite option on the board tonight, despite that ballpark.
Yeah, I'm with you. I still think there's a little bit of concern for me with the lefties. But for the most part, I'm not too worried about, because the strikeout rate's there. It's 28.3% against both sides of the plate this season. So even if he gets up, 1 or 2, even 3 earned runs, like you said, the strikeouts are going to be there. I do think he has a decent chance at a win. Vegas thinks it's a toss-up, but I don't know. I kind of can see the Giants. I'm not a big Guerrero guy, but I think it's going to be a little bit low-scoring game. So hopefully Samardzija can kind of sneak away with a win there. But even at that price, you don't absolutely need him to.
Yeah, and I think he's got a really nice strikeout floor. Like you said, a lot of lefties there, not any that are particularly good. Even Eric Thames hasn't been great recently. But against righties, he's got a 41-3 strikeout to walk ratio over 37 innings. Even against lefties, where he's got that high WOBA allowed, still 43-8. Strikeouts to walk over 35 innings. So you figure a team striking out this much, I'm not going to give him a floor like a Kershaw type 8 strikeout floor, but you got to figure 6 to 7 here, unless he just gets absolutely killed, and definitely double digit upside. And there's not a lot of guys with that tonight.
No, I mean, and you look, I mean, that's for his last start against Nationals, 8, 8, 8, 9, 11 strikeouts.
Yeah, and he's pitching deep into games because he doesn't walk batters, so he keeps his pitch count low. So I mean, he's one of those guys that, I mean, he's not obviously an elite pitcher, but he's in the very good category, and nobody ever seems to play him.
Yeah, so I mean, a difference between the two. I mean, even on FanDuel, still it's 1,100 difference. So he can allow you to get that extra bat.
Yep.
So we're going to head next. I mean, Sean Manaea is a guy we can talk about. He's kind of figured things out going up against a Toronto team that's heading out west. Low run total in that one, obviously friendly ballpark. I know Blue Jays got Donaldson back. Obviously, that helps Tulowitzki, but I mean, really outside of Donaldson, I'm not too worried about this lineup.
No, I mean, and I love Sean Manaea. I mean, he's been finally, his issue early in the season wasn't pitching deep into games, walking too many guys, and over, the small amount of time he's actually pitched in the league, he still has some issues with walks. But, this is still a guy that's got big time strikeout upside, and over his last two games, really two of the more tough matchups you're going to see. On the road at the Yankees, on the road at Cleveland, two pretty good offensive teams. I mean, 17 strikeouts to 2 walks, 7 total hits over 14 innings. And I mean, really I watched that Cleveland game, and you saw Frankie Lindor almost hit a homer in his first at-bat, went to the wall, hit a homer in his next at-bat. Outside of that, I mean, there was almost zero hard contact. I mean, he just looked absolutely tremendous. And obviously, I think there's still this, I won't say misconception, but there's still a belief that the Toronto is an elite team against lefties. And while Tulo's been out of the lineup, I don't care about him. He seems like his prime days are over. Donaldson, I obviously still love, but Bautista, Donaldson, maybe that's it you worry about in this lineup. Big ballpark. I think he's in a really good spot. I mean, that FanDuel price is what, 7th most expensive. I love him tonight.
Yeah, I mean, we saw this last year with Manaea. It was a guy who struggled at the beginning and then really figured things out and was really solid down the stretch. And we're looking at that again. 27.4% strikeout rate, 14.3% swinging strike rate, over 50% ground ball rate. I mean, that's a really solid combo for some success. And, unlike Hap on the other side, I kind of like the A's offense a little bit more than I do the Blue Jays. So I do think actually Oakland can put some runs on the board and give them a decent spot.
Yeah, and I mean, he's not one of those guys that's got significant splits either. Against lefties, 152 WOBA allowed. I mean, only faced 43 batters, but lefties haven't been touching him. Even righties only batting 213 off him with a 289 WOBA. So I think he's going to be that guy that is going to be way lower owned than he should be. And obviously, if his command's not there, his floor could be lower, but I mean, he's got great upside. And if you watch those last two games, I mean, he looked just absolutely tremendous.
Yeah, and I think if you don't want to pay up for an SP2, I'm okay with using him in cash games, actually.
Yeah, I am too. I mean, if this game was in Toronto, it might be a little different, but in Oakland, you could make a couple mistakes and still walk away from that. So
yep. We'll talk about Dan Straley. I think he's appropriately priced. I wish he was a little bit cheaper, but I think given the fact that he has pitched well this year, I can see it. Wind's blowing in at Wrigley. You're looking at the Cubs total right around 4. Miami's is as well. Look at the Cubs offense this year. I mean, it hasn't been great. 25th in WOBA against right-handed pitching, not a high hard contact, 22% strikeout rate. Sterling might not be a bad option or a sneaky option to just kind of go out there and have a quality start and even have a shot to win, given that Eddie Butler's on the other side.
Yeah, and like you said, that wind blowing in significantly. Obviously, we're not expecting a game like he put up last time out with the 10 strikeouts. And he's still a guy that he's been alternating 5 and 7 innings pitched for the most part, most of them closer to 5. So not a guy that's been pitching particularly deep into games. But like you said, on the opposite side, I mean, that Marlins offense has been better than the Cubs. I expect they're going to put up some runs and, temper your expectations with the strikeout upside. But the Cubs have, a 23% strikeout rate against righties this year. And I don't know. Everybody seems to think they're going to get it figured out. But, I mean, their second best pitcher, Hendricks, has been, slightly above average. Lester's been okay, but not Lester good. He did throw a guy out sneaking off first base the other day, which was somehow a highlight. Like, that's impressive for a pitcher to throw 45 feet to first base. But
for him, it is.
Yeah, that's his milestone, winning the World Series and throwing a guy out at first. But I think that, I don't know. I'm not saying that all of these players are not good by any means. Obviously, Rizzo, Bryant, Those guys still really good. Zobrist's been okay, but they're just not good so far this year. Like, they got time to figure it out, but I have no problem picking on them.
No, and I think they still carry that name value, and yes, they can go off at any time. And I think that's what keeps people away from pitching guys against them. And you just look at Straley. I mean, take out J.A. Happ, who's only pitched 20 innings. Straley has the fourth best strikeout rate on the slate. I mean, 25.7%. Fly ball pitcher. And I think, obviously, if this game was wind blowing out or even just neutral, I wouldn't consider Straley. But because that wind's blowing in, I think it bumps him up a ton.
Yeah, I mean, really, the only issue you kind of see, I guess, is that command. But you got that issue with a lot of guys today. I mean, his 10% strikeout rate really isn't much higher than Martinez or Manaea. So, normal slate, you might worry more about that. But, on this one, I think he's in a fine spot.
Yep. Junior Guerra, guy you want to talk about, going up against San Francisco.
I don't really want to talk about him. I just needed another option because, It's more so how bad the Giants' offense has been than how good he's been, because he's only had, I guess, 2.5 starts now because he got hurt in the opener when I think 3 innings there. But in 2 pretty tough matchups, obviously he's not a big strikeout guy. He's a guy that kind of just came out of nowhere last year, 31, 32 years old. 9-6 strikeout ratio, not particularly good over the last 2 games, but 11 2/3. Giving up just 7 total hits and 1 earned run against the Mets in Arizona. I mean, 2 of the better lineups in the National League. Now he faces the worst lineup in the National League. So, I think if you need a guy for cheap, he's probably the way that I'll go. He certainly doesn't really have much upside. You don't really like that ballpark, but, he's a guy that's done a good job of limiting damage. So I think he's in a fine spot. It's more so, like I said, the matchup than his talent level. Honestly, if you're looking at this slate, there's not a ton of guys you feel you have to pay up for as far as big bats. So you probably don't really need to dip down past Manaea, I suppose, on FanDuel. But I mean, Guerra is sitting even more expensive than him there. So I think if you're looking for a low-owned guy that could get you 6 quality innings, 40 FanDuel points, maybe like 16, 17 on DraftKings, I think he's a decent option. But on a slate like this, we're instantly eliminating half these guys. We're not playing Butler, not playing Kennedy. Of course, we're not playing Cologne. Probably not playing Pivetta, Wojciechowski. Like, half these guys are just instantly eliminated. So, I mean, I think you just kind of have to try to find that one guy to get you a quality start for low ownership. And I think he could be that guy.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you. And as you said, eliminating half of the field makes it kind of easy. Let's talk about the Nationals-Dodgers game. Gio Gonzalez versus Hyunjin Ryu. This might be a game where it's just maybe 1 or 2 one-offs, but I think overall this is just a big stay-away game in general.
Yeah, I mean, neither guy with a good strikeout rate, both around 21%. Gonzalez, as always, a huge walk rate, 12%. I mean, you look at what their splits. I mean, obviously Gonzalez still pretty solid against lefties, but they're both giving up, 34.6% hard contact for Ryu, Gio 32%, which isn't horrible, but I don't know. I don't like playing anybody against the Nationals, so that kind of takes out Ryu for me, especially a lefty, because somehow, despite having a bunch of lefties in the lineup, they just absolutely murder lefties. So that's kind of a no for me because I don't think he's particularly good anyway. And then, on the opposite side, there's just lefties against the Dodgers. We were talking about it before the show. Lefties against Dodgers generally in a pretty good spot, but even the lefties in that lineup, Bellinger's hitting lefties decent. Corey Seager hasn't been great against them, but we know he can hit them. Even Adrian Gonzalez is decent. So, I think for me, unless you're going contrarian stack with one of these offenses, I don't think I'll touch either pitcher.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, Gio, obviously the better of the two, in my opinion, and it's not saying much. I just don't think I can use them. I think the 5 that we talked about is just – they're just far ahead of them. You look at Gonzalez, 5th highest SIERA on the slate. The walk rate, as you said, it's an issue, 12%. Everything's been with him is about pretty much getting a little bit lucky than what he should be. So the ERA of 3.03 is not going to stay. I expect that to go up into the high 3s, low 4s by the end of the year.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, he's a guy that, at one time had that solid upside, and, maybe he gets a quality start tonight, but I don't think on this slate I'm going to force guys in that I don't like, because despite it not being a slate for pitching, I'm with you. Those guys we mentioned are going to be the only guys I'll probably target.
Yep. So that's going to wrap things up with us. You can have another day at fantasycafe.com. Check out our great tools and content.